Holodeck 3 program is reinstated.
Open sesame!
Commander Klingon vessel. We are energizing transporter beam. Now.
One, engage!
All right. Hello. Welcome, everyone, to Star Trek from the Holodeck. This is the Picard edition. Hello. All right. Welcome, everyone. We are back. We are here to discuss the recent episode of Star Trek Picard, Season 3, Episode 2, titled Disengage. I am Michael Flores, your host, and in the studio with me, as usual, is Ensign David Sabal. Hello.
Hello, everybody.
All right, Dave. Were you excited about this episode?
I was excited, especially afterwards, because we get another solid outing, you know, when it comes to building up this season.
Mm-hmm.
I think Terry Matalas is actually on a really
Matalas.
Terry Matalas. I keep
Matalas.
saying Matalas.
Yeah. We have to learn how to pronounce this gentleman's name because I feel bad because I had thought that he was a fellow brother. Like I thought he was Hispanic, you know? So I was like, okay, well, listen, I know Spanish a little bit. I know how to pronounce Spanish, and I thought it was Matalas. So I'm calling him Matalas.
And now we find out, like, less than a week ago, it's Matalas.
Well, and I'm embarrassed a bit because he listened to our show, and we're calling him Matalas.
I know. That's why it's like old habits are really hard, especially since we've been calling him Matalas for like a year now.
Yeah, here's his name right here.
Say your name for the mic.
My name is Terry Matalas.
Matalas.
There we go. I had to Google it because someone shot me a message saying, I think you're saying his name wrong. I'm like, nah, bro, it's Spanish.
It's Spanish.
It's not.
But
sometimes our ignorance shows on this show. Believe it or not, David.
Yeah. Just a little bit, just a tiny little bit sometimes. But
we may get names wrong, but we never get our Star Trek wrong.
I can't say that properly. No.
So, listen, you're dealing with 15 years of canon. Sometimes we fuck up.
Exactly.
It's hard to keep track of everything.
Yeah. We can at least say, Mike, we are passionate about Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to quote unquote hate on Star Trek all the time. But we are very passionate about Star Trek.
Yeah, very passionate. Just like I'm passionate about 7 and 9.
Oh, who isn't? Dude, Jerry Ryan, in 2 episodes, I really want to see a series led by Jerry Ryan.
Well, dude, what have we been saying since season 1? They needed to realign 7 of 9 with who she was in Voyager.
Yes.
And since Matalas has taken the reins, he has slowly realigned this character to be in sync with the character from Star Trek Voyager.
He's done an amazing recovery job on a lot of characters that a lot of Star Trek fans wanted to give up on.
The subtlety is back. Jerry Ryan as an actor is good at what she does.
Yeah.
And I'm not a fan of everyone wanting to be bad or wanting to be a badass. It was kind of my feelings about the last episode. I didn't get into it because I don't feel like it was that big of a deal to go into a whole diatribe about it. But it was like, listen, Gates McFadden, you're a doctor. Everybody wants to be a badass with a gun. And I remember that's what was hitting all the blogs. And that's what she was talking about in interviews. I'm like, I get to do stuff I've never done before. You're not a badass.
Yeah.
What is wrong with just being a smart character? Why does everyone need to be a badass? If Geordi LaForge comes in with 2 phasers, double wielding phasers, I'm going to fucking say something. I'm like, come on.
Exactly.
Can somebody just be happy being a normal Starfleet officer? Not everyone needs to be fucking Rambo.
You have to understand who your character was, but more than that, you got to understand what their whole job was.
Yeah. I'm making jokes. I didn't have a problem with Dr. Crusher. I love that character, and I do not have a problem with it. And it's not like we haven't seen her take control before. In fact, there was an entire episode that I actually really loved from Star Trek The Next Generation days. I forgot the name of the episode where she becomes the captain of the Enterprise. And it's a great episode. It shows her ability to lead. It was a moment where the writers allowed her to flourish a bit rather than always being in that back room, in sick bay.
In sick bay, yeah.
So I don't have a problem with that as long as that's not who she is through the entire season this year.
Well,
if she is just this character that has a grudge, a chip on her shoulder, then we're dealing with the same equation we dealt with in the first season of Picard, where you can't just have a character that is just that, a person, a regular person that's a human being like you and I. Not everyone picks up guns and starts blasting people and has to prove they're a badass. And I know I'm getting a little bit into out of the realm of our show right now, but it is something that we see a lot in movies.
We do.
A lot of women actors, because they've been pigeonholed, and I understand, because they've been pigeonholed for so long in specific roles. It's the nature of Hollywood. It's the nature of decades of television and movies that have created gender stereotypes and how women should be portrayed and how men should be portrayed. But now there's backlash because of that. And we see how every woman now who returns to, like, let's say a movie gets remade or it's rebooted, they're no longer who they were. They're now basically a man.
Yeah, they have to change them into a more
masculine. They give them masculine traits.
And like the thing is like, I think what, especially in this particular season, what I'm seeing with the character of Beverly Crusher, what I'm hoping, if she turns into something like that,
I don't think she will.
But as long as you give us a story, why?
There you go.
Why this progression?
Narrative reasons.
The narrative reasons, because the problem that I've always been harping about, the problem with Seven in Series 1, there was no build-up. Season 1 was, there was no explanation. It was just, she was here.
There was, but it was very flimsy.
It was very, very flimsy, and it was almost like brushed aside. It was just like, oh, it's because of this.
Yeah.
Okay, so we don't see any character growth. She just immediately flips a switch.
Well, there was no
build-up.
There was not enough background.
Not enough background.
Yeah.
And I mean, since the first episode, I think that as long as they basically keep us engaged with this story and explain what Beverly's been doing for the past 20 years, give her a valid reason why she left the crew, I think you have something really good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And the Jack Crusher stuff was very interesting. Now we know that briefcase on board Dr. Crusher's starship was not her husband's or her former husband. It was her son. Okay, how weird is that? We find out in this episode that it's Picard's son.
Yes.
But she names him after her deceased husband. That's got to play a big part, right? When we start exploring the whys and the hows and what happened, who is this child? Why did she feel the need to run away for 20-some years to raise this kid, obviously on her own? That has to be explained, right?
Oh, it has to. I mean,
do you think it's going to be more aligned with what you were talking about last episode?
Even more so, yeah.
Her feelings towards Picard, how she's never quite forgiven him.
Yeah.
For the death of her husband.
Death of her husband. Look, I put the pieces out there and people thought I was crazy.
I don't forgive you, but you could put your penis in me, though.
Yeah.
You give me a child.
You mean to tell me that basically she is just going to brush aside the fact that her entire story started off with the death of her husband. And then
day one, right?
Day one. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, her son vanishes.
He doesn't vanish, David. Quit saying that. No, he doesn't. He's in Nemesis. There are some things that can be explained by logic. And if Wesley Crusher, you said this, I don't know if you said this on the show or you said this on the pre-show for Patreon, but Dave, he didn't just vanish. I think logically we can assume that at some point he said, "Hey, Mom, I'm a traveler. That's why I came to Deanna Troi and Riker's wedding.
I don't think he did. That's the story that I think I'm going with, is the fact that
You don't think he actually went to the wedding when he was there?
No. What I'm saying is it's never explained to Beverly. It's never explained to Beverly.
Okay, so
what
he
happens to him.
vanishes then. David, do you not think they had a conversation? Logically. You don't think he said, "Hey, Mom, I've been away for a while"?
I think we might go there.
That's stupid. If they do that, that's a reach.
If it is, it's going to be a big reach. I said that in the last episode. It's going to be a reach.
Wesley Crusher, Picard did nothing but do right by Wesley Crusher. So for that to be a story would show us that the writer currently has no understanding of the relationship between Wesley Crusher and Picard, which was a strong relationship. It was a mentor and protege relationship. He broke every single fucking rule to put a child on the bridge in order to accommodate. So I don't feel like he ever did anything wrong. So if they try to say that he did something to Wesley, that's... Wesley, he even saved Wesley from court-martial when he was doing hijinks at the Starfleet Academy that got people killed.
Yeah.
So not only did he teach him how to be a Starfleet officer and take him under his wing and essentially be a pseudo-father, he also protected him from from mistakes that he probably should have faced the music for.
That's why I'm telling you, I think we're in for more story pertaining to that, and something, probably there's some pent-up frustration on Beverly's part about Picard's treatment of her son. I think it might go that route. Because
I'm not going to say you're wrong.
Especially with
But if they do, David, it has to make sense. They can't deconstruct what was obvious.
Yes,
in the next generation.
They can't. I hope that they won't deconstruct it, but they have to now explain it. Because, so you mean to tell me she has another son without any of the crew knowing? None of the crew has even known that Jack Crusher existed.
Okay, so a few things. It would feel like they're mimicking Jerry Ryan's or 7 of 9 story from the first season. However, it seems like the idea behind whatever they're doing is they're essentially trying to solve the injustices going on within the galaxy.
Yes.
Okay, that's the same thing that 7 of 9 was doing. Now, my big problem with that is that it says something about Starfleet and the Federation.
Unfortunately, yes.
And I don't know if I like that, because then you're once again undermining what the Federation and Starfleet stand for. However, there is room to delve into that type of story, because if you go back 20 years and we use Star Trek, what was it? Insurrection, I believe, where the villain in that story pointed a finger at the weakening powers of the Federation due to the Dominion War and the Borg attack.
Yes.
So if things have gone crazy in the universe, people are doing without, and it has caused former Starfleet officers to leave the ranks in order to do things that they can't do, I would be okay with that, because it would make sense based on the political fallout of the war.
Yes.
Not that Starfleet and the Federation have lost their values and their moral compass, but because they don't have the power or the resources to do certain things. And that's why you have the Fenris Rangers, a.k.a. 7 of 9. Mm-hmm. That's why you have Worf doing what he's doing. In fact, we'll get into that in a second, because he said a few things in an interview recently that will shed some light on exactly what is happening with his character this season. It's not spoilers, it's just clarity.
Yeah.
And then, of course, what we're seeing with Jack Crusher and Beverly Crusher in this episode. If we're dealing with that still, the political fallout of a weakened government, I'm okay with that, as long as they're not pointing fingers at Starfleet and the Federation again as if they have lost their way.
Yeah, because you gotta.
I don't want that, Dave. Do you want that?
No, absolutely not. But I do want continuity narratively for my Star Trek universe.
Yeah.
We're coming off of.
So you're saying that would make sense then?
It would make sense
if that fallout is the catalyst for many of these characters
changing.
I mean, even Picard. Look at Picard breaking ranks. Essentially, that was the premise for the first season, and where he was at and why Starfleet wasn't really happy with him, because what did he do? He didn't listen to them, and he helped the Romulans.
Yeah.
When Starfleet didn't. It's not that they didn't want to. It's because they had no resources to assist in the migration of the people to a new home. So if you take Picard and where he was at in the beginning of season 1, and then you take 7 and 9 and what she was doing prior to season 1, and now you have Dr. Crusher and Jack Crusher doing their thing as well, helping to fix the injustice, suddenly we have character continuity.
Yes.
All of them were doing something that the Federation was unable to do.
Yeah.
That works.
And it would make sense narratively when you put it into context with what we know as Star Trek fans. You're coming off of a gigantic war from Deep Space Nine, from the Dominion War.
And people didn't watch Deep Space Nine, because believe it or not, there are a lot out there.
There is.
That was a major thing.
Oh, yeah. That was a gigantic thing.
That was a major thing. It also put a spotlight or a lens over the Federation and their dealings and what they're willing to do to defeat this horrible threat to humanity.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to say they were morally compromised, but there were moments that definitely veered in that direction.
Oh,
so
all the time in Deep Space Nine, when you think of like all the stories they did, that entire series, the more I've rewatched that entire series, Mike,
it's
perfect.
Yeah.
Well, not just that it's perfect, but one of the overall stories is the price that you have to pay.
Yeah.
That is one of the biggest story arcs that I've started seeing in my rewatches, is like the whole story of Deep Space Nine is how far are you willing to go to win a war?
That's kind of what Picard feels. Picard feels like more of an extension of Deep Space Nine.
It does.
I saw some people complaining about that, saying, well, this should be more written within the tone of the Next Generation. And I would agree with that if we didn't have Deep Space Nine and Voyager come afterwards. It was a very different world when Next Generation ended. It was a very different story world.
Well,
when Deep Space Nine picked up, it was very different. It was Deep Space Nine. In a lot of ways, Deep Space Nine challenged the validity of Federation ideals.
Yeah,
and they posed questions.
And
how much compromises do you make before you no longer are what you are supposed to be? When do you throw out your ideology that has secured peace for hundreds of years, that sent humanity into a new golden age? Now suddenly that idea, that way of life, and the things you do to make sure you can uphold that way of life, what do you do when it is threatened by an outside force like the Dominion that was purposely trying to undermine the very being of the Federation? And that's what Deep Space Nine did. It answered that question.
Oh, yeah. And I understand that statement that you made about like how fans have stated Picard should have been written more in line with TNG, because TNG ended with such a high and hopeful,
very optimistic,
very optimistic feeling.
Yeah.
But fans have to understand there are series that came after that that continued the story of the universe forward.
I mean, even the movies felt the effect of the Dominion War.
That's what I liked about like the later movies, was they started throwing in that continuity that basically the Dominion War affected everybody.
Insurrection and Nemesis were both products of that post-Dominion War.
Yeah.
That's why the tone was very different in those films. And same thing with Picard now, bringing it back. The reason why Picard feels this way is because in a lot of ways, they're still dealing with the aftermath of that horrible war that shook the bedrock of the Federation. Think about it. 20 years isn't that long.
No.
Look at 9/11. And I point to 9/11 because it's probably the worst thing that's happened in this country, specifically on American soil, in the last 20-some years. And there's still political fallout from that event. There are still people trying to wrestle and understand what happened.
Exactly.
There are still people living with the causality of that event and how it affected their life. So it would make sense that the tone of Picard would fit more in line with what Deep Space Nine was doing.
Yes.
So, all right. So we got answers on Jack Crusher. He is, in fact, well, at least we're led to believe
Right
up
now,
to this moment.
Up to this moment.
We're led to believe that he is Picard's son. And the question, as you were getting to, Dave, is why? Why was he hidden? And what did Picard do? Was he a bad lay or something? Did he finally seal the deal and then Dr. Crusher bailed?
Was he worse than the Irish ghost that she had?
Did she ghost him, or did he hit it and quit it? Like, how do you not know? Was it just a one thing and done? 9 months later, like, here comes a baby and Picard's nowhere to be found? Like, so I want those questions answered, which obviously they're going to answer those questions. It's a big one, and I hope it's a sad
It has to
answer.
be.
It has to be something that resonates and it hits Picard.
In order for it to be, I am going to ghost not just Picard. You gotta understand, she didn't just ghost Picard. She ghosted everybody.
Yeah.
Riker, Troy, all the TNG crew. Beverly Crusher just picked up her bags and gave them an Irish goodbye.
Yeah. So that's where I agree with you, David, where you say it has to be something
Big.
I do agree with that. I don't like the whole Wesley Crusher aspect because it just doesn't quite fit, at least in my mind as of yet. But the idea where you're coming from, that there's got to be some animosity there.
Yeah.
There
has to be.
Something. There's got to be some reason why she chose to just run. And I don't want it to be like she was under attack, she was threatened by someone. I feel like that would be a little strange for no one to seek her out. There's got to be a reason why they let her go.
And that's the thing, too, is kind of like it has to be something major. And that's when my brain started thinking is like, okay, what are major reasons a person would actually do that? To actually just drift away for 20 years. There has to be a start point. And
do you think it's like Dr. Carol Marcus syndrome? Like she just simply didn't want her son to be a captain in Starfleet?
This is what I'm more slightly worried about because, again, we're treading on familiar waters. Like we're essentially taking the same storyline of Captain Kirk and pasting it onto Jean-Luc.
There are definitely some intertextual aspects.
And I'm worried that they might do that. Now, if Terry Matalas,
he's white, dude.
Can actually
quit trying to bring him into the Hispanic fold.
Yeah.
He's not our brother.
If he can continue on this story, fine. If it works, go for it.
Mm-hmm.
Just don't. I'm worried that he's treading on too familiar waters that basically people will just like. It'll fall flat.
Well, also, it's got to be sad for this. I want to understand it. They have to be very careful because we have to understand it from both perspectives. We have to sympathize or empathize with Beverly Crusher.
Yes.
And we also have to empathize with Picard. So they got to find a middle ground, and meaning we have to be able to understand both aspects via narrative reasoning. And one way they can do that, or I should say, and the reason why they need to do that, David, is because to me, if that was me, forget the fact that A, I would want to know my son, okay? But also B, she knows. She was close to him. She's got to know how he felt about the death of his brother and his nephew.
Yeah.
And how it affected him and his idea of no longer having any other Picards and that he's the last one, and how a legacy and allowing this family lineage to continue that's been around for hundreds of years to just fall apart because of his own unwillingness to have a family. For Beverly Crusher to then run away with a child, that's a big deal.
That's a big deal.
So they're going to have to find a reasonable explanation as to why we can get over it as fans and
Yes.
not be mad at
Beverly.
Beverly Crusher. So I'm anxious. I do like it. I do like my melodrama.
And I do too, especially since it ties so narratively well to what originally, as funny as it sounds, one of the bright spots of season 1 was Picard lamenting about his legacy, talking about what is his legacy about.
Did he do that in the first season?
Yeah, that was in the first season when
I
he
don't
talks
remember.
about being the last Picard. When he
I
has
thought
that, when he was
that was in Generations.
No. We're talking about in the very beginning of Picard, season 1.
I don't remember.
When he's making the speech to the new
Oh, okay.
to the new cadets.
Okay, I vaguely remember. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's talking about I'm the last one. I'm the last one of my family to be able to do this.
All right, Dragonheart.
But like I like the fact that they found a way to bring that back and bridge that narrative forward and kind of tie it in. Now I'm just worried that do you think they would go the route of killing Jack? Like what they did with Kirk's son?
No, because that would be okay. In movie form, it worked.
In movie form, it worked.
For what they were doing and how it was more about Kirk and how it would affect him. And retrospectively, when you look back and how it essentially built out his characterization, Captain Kirk's characterization, and it became the embodiment of his character dealing with this death. And it stuck with him and actually exacerbated his prejudice towards Klingons. So it mattered. It was such an amazing story aspect to add to a character. So that retrospectively worked beautifully, that death.
Yeah.
This character and the way he was introduced is very different. And if you were to kill him in the very season you introduce him, you have to question, or I should say you have to ask, what was the fucking point?
Exactly. And that's what I'm also worried too, is they might not kill him off, but they might go, no, he's not real. By the end, the big twist is, oh, he's not really his son.
He's actually
Someone else's son.
Riker's son.
Riker's been busy.
He's all, Beverly, is this like, I'm going to wake you up from your coma right now. I need to know, is this mine?
Is this mine?
Or is this That's so fucked up. Okay, so to answer your question, Dave, this isn't a spoiler because it's been out there on the interviews, but it seems like the writers of Picard may have future plans for Picard's son.
Yeah.
Now, I had been theorizing that they will find a way to always bring Picard back because he's now in a synthetic body.
Dude, I loved it when Vatic brought that up.
We'll get to it.
Oh,
yes.
God,
We'll
I
get
was so
to it.
happy.
Yeah, we'll get to it. But it does seem like they have some plans outside of Picard for this character, for Jack Crusher. In a recent interview, the actor Ed Spillers, I want to say. Yeah. He had mentioned that he talked to Metalis for a very long time, and this character had been gestating, and their plans for, the whole 18 months of prep for this season. And he said that he's got a lot of ideas about this character. I'm not going to lie, because I'm proud of the fact that Terry and I discussed this almost every day for the last 18 months. What could happen? He pitched this particular story and narrative to me as if it's, and I think he grew in this assumption as we went along, that this is almost like Jack's origin story. So you don't give a character an origin story unless you have future plans that far exceed 10 episodes. There are definitely more stories to be told. That's a key point.
Yeah.
If we're given the opportunity to tell them. So take that how you want it, how you want to, Dave, but I think that's a clear indicator that he does not die.
Yes.
I'm
guessing
glad
from that. Yeah.
I'm glad. I don't like when you bring in characters just to kill them off because you're trying to create emotion. I feel like that's a way to cheat the audience. Obviously, it happens from time to time, and it does work, but I don't know if a show like Star Trek needs those types of gimmicks. With the amount of history we have with these characters, do we really need to introduce a new character so you can then rip them away to create emotion? The emotion's already there. The history of these characters are already there. We're dealing with people who have known each other for so long that the emotions are built in. Look at the final episode in the first season between Data and Picard.
Yes.
They didn't need to introduce someone new to create a moment like that. It's already there. It's already
there.
built in to the legacy of those characters as well as the canon.
And I think that's the thing I'm kind of worried about when I thought about the parallels that season 3 has with season 1. I mean, in season 1 we introduced Soji, who was Data's quote unquote daughter. And she was supposed to be that bridge in the gap of the legacy of Data.
Mm-hmm.
Now Jack is kind of like in the Soji role where he's the epitome, or he's the
Did you say pigment?
I can't think of the name. I can't think of the proper word to say it, but he's basically the parallel to Picard's legacy. He represents Picard's legacy. That's probably the best way to put it. Where Soji was supposed to represent Data's legacy. So,
but also she's harboring homicidal intent, and that just feels weird.
And that just feels weird. See,
Yeah,
and
let's not get into first season, please. For some of those things.
But this is like why I'm a little hesitant still about like season 3 is because like I'm seeing the parallels and I'm like going,
yes,
Terry Matalis is
Matalis,
David. Terry Matalis.
Get it right.
Is he just trying to make up for season 1 and try to correct the road, so to speak, or is he trying to do his own story?
This is different. Jack feels like Picard. At least the young versions that we saw of Picard. We know Picard was an arrogant douchebag. He said it himself.
Yeah.
So to see that we have, Jack Crusher is a bit arrogant and a little full of himself, a little overconfident. That is exactly how Picard described himself as a young man.
Till he had his accident.
Right, when he lost his heart against that Nausicaan for being an asshole. Maybe Jack Crusher needs to get his heart removed.
Oh my God. That would be so hilarious if that happened. Perfect parallel. I would picture Q showing up going,
who?
Gotcha. Q.
Did you say Cuba Gooding Jr.?
No. I picture Q showing up.
Oh, okay.
And where did you get
I could have swore you said Cuba Gooding Jr. I'm like, wait, he's in a show.
You got to work on your hearing nowadays.
Oh my God.
But I picture Q showing up and just looking at Picard going, gotcha.
That'd be awful. David, never write. Never write for Star Trek.
Yeah, but that's how I would write Q.
Okay, so a little bit more on the Raffi stuff. We touched on it a bit. Now, one of our problems with the first season, and please, listeners, every time I say one of my problems, I get some message from someone saying, "How dare you, sir? The first season was flawless." I'm glad you.
Flawless?
I'm glad you loved it. The first season was fun. I'm not saying it's not.
It was fun for you.
For me, there was some problems with it. That's all, with the execution, not the story, the execution. Maybe that's what we should say, because it wasn't the story. The story was fine. It's the way it was executed.
In all seriousness, yes.
That's probably the best way to say it.
Yeah.
So one of the problems with Raffi was that there was very little development on a character that was supposed to be front and center. And when they did give us development, it was very superficial and very oddly inserted in moments that were convenient. And you can't insert development
Character
or development
Yeah.
in an episode where you need it to matter. How you properly insert these aspects, and they're called narrative plants. You insert them far sooner than when you need them, so that people don't say, well, that was fucking wow. So you just introduce that so you can then solve a problem in an episode or explain away a problem. That's not good writing necessarily. So the way Matalis is yet again realigning, or not realigning because Raffi's new, recontextualizing
That's a better way of putting it, yeah.
Raffi's background in 5 minutes, David.
Exactly.
we understand her far better than anything Shaban tried to do with her in the first season. With that weird scene between her and her son that made no sense, that came out of nowhere. There was no setup and there was no closure on it.
And it took way too goddamn long.
It felt very strange. It didn't feel like it belonged in the episode
At all.
And it didn't really do much for the character. Whereas here, in 5 minutes with a conversation with her ex-husband, you now find out why she's at odds with her son and what her whole fucking thing is, her whole problem. Drug abuse, which I don't think that was ever fully stated. Was that?
No, it wasn't fully stated, but it was always hinted at.
Yes. So now we get a definitive statement from her husband and then another definitive statement from the Ferengi, Sneed, or Snide. I don't remember his name. And we understand now what happened. She chose Starfleet over her family. David, I always say, proper development doesn't always take 60 minutes.
60 minutes.
Sometimes it takes 5 minutes. And that's what they did so well in this episode with Raffi. In 2 episodes, David, I'm more drawn to Raffi than I have been in the last 2 seasons. I find her more interesting. She has an actual point rather than just being a character that was. I didn't like what they did with her too much last season. It wasn't a deal breaker, but I also felt like she was just hanging on to Seven as a secondary thought as a character. She wasn't that important in my opinion. It was more about Seven, which it should be. Seven is a more beloved character. But in this episode and last episode, they're making her really matter by giving her this separate storyline that no doubt is a narrative strand of the main myth arc that will be brought in. So that all works. I love the Raffi stuff. And then you find out, David, biggest squee of all time, that her Starfleet intelligence handler is the main man himself, Worf. I saw him creeping up in the background. I'm like, is that
when I saw that, yeah.
I was like, is that Worf?
And I was like going, oh, some fools are going to die right now.
Man, David.
He just sneaks up and then just assassinates everybody.
What did I say off season? I said, why has the new era of Star Trek refrained from using the Klingon theme? Why?
Oh my God, yeah.
And the fact that they used a variation of that theme when they move into that close-up on Worf after he takes out those baddies, I clapped.
Yeah.
Because Worf in Star Trek probably has some of the best appearances. To this day, David, I think the best appearance of all time is when Worf is on the Defiant fighting the Klingons fighting the Borg in First Contact.
Yeah.
And he says, get ready for ramming speed, and you hear the Klingon theme.
Yeah, and then he says, today is a good day to die.
It's such a great moment. And this isn't as good, but it's fucking close.
It's close.
What a great introduction to Worf, man.
Especially this is a more grizzled Worf. You could kind of tell. And it goes back to like what we said in the beginning of the show about narrative continuity. This is how I kind of almost imagine Worf becoming after his time on DS9, where he's been on that scenario of a Cold War, do not trust anybody type of series, total war around him, one of the darkest points in Starfleet history. He's at the heart and center of that entire storyline. Yeah, I can imagine his character kind of drifting to like this point where it's like he's more cautious. He's more basically, hey, everything has to be done for a reason. We do things that Starfleet can't. Doing something with Starfleet intelligence seemed to fit.
Well, we don't know if he's doing things that Starfleet can't, because that would be Section 31, and that's not clear yet. Now, he's wearing the all black.
He's wearing the all black, and he, at least at the most, he's part of Starfleet intelligence.
Well, yes, we know that. That's pretty definitive at this point. We know that it was heavily implied that he was her handler.
And I'll be honest, most of the characters from Deep Space Nine, I've always imagined them becoming some point or another tied to Starfleet intelligence. Not Section 31, because they've been...
If anybody was going to be Section 31, it would have been Dr. Bashir.
Dr. Bashir.
Yeah.
But like everybody else, I kind of imagine them having some dealings with Starfleet intelligence. With all of the stuff that they've been through.
Yeah. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know if I have the same opinion as you. I would feel like a lot of them are tired of war. That's why when they had put Worf in the trailer for Picard season 3 and he said, I'm a pacifist now, I'm like, that makes sense to me. A man that has seen so much death in his life to become different in his view of combat and war. Listen, you can be a pacifist and still be a warrior. I mean, the samurai, I wouldn't say are pacifists, not even close, but there is a passivity to their spirituality and the way they think. So I didn't have a problem with that aspect in the trailer. So I'm wondering how they're going to connect that now, unless that scene is simply a joke.
I'm wondering I'm wondering that too, is if it's just done for funny moments,
which is fine.
Is fine.
Now, I don't have a problem with this, with him doing what he's doing. There was a recent interview with Michael Dorn where he had said that he thinks Worf should be a character like Jack Reacher or John Wick or the Equalizer, and not meaning a badass that goes around shooting people, but the idea, again, David, this goes right back to what we said about Picard, Dr. Crusher, and 7 of 9. So Matalis seems like he is creating this narrative continuity in terms of the context, the historical context, chronologically speaking, in the world post-TNG, leading into Deep Space Nine, and how the Federation has been weakened and possibly don't have the power to do the things that they used to do, like help certain marginalized species and people living in the remnants or the outer phrase of Federation space. Because he said that he feels like his character is a character that goes around not based on revenge, but based on justice.
Yes.
That he goes around helping people because of his need for justice. So he says, I always thought that Worf had a place in the show somehow, maybe not even the lead, but just hold on. That's not what he said. That's what the interviewer said. Worf is like Jack Reacher the Tom Cruise movies, or John Wick, where he's not out for revenge, but he basically goes around the universe making things right. That's where I think he'll end up. So if Worf is saying that's where Michael Dorn is saying that's where I think he'll end up, I'm sure that's where he's going to end up.
I think that's especially like with how that introduced him right now, it seems that way, where it's like Worf is the type of person to basically just go out there and wander and help people. For some reason,
and if Starfleet intelligence gives him that liberty,
and
that freedom to stretch his legs and pick the missions or the situations.
And it goes with that idea that basically, I really like that you brought up about him being more samurai-ish. And Worf at that point could be kind of like a Ronin, a wandering person, just wandering the land, helping people. Because that's what, the romanticism of being a Ronin or a samurai Ronin is like.
Yeah.
They're like the heroes that just travel the countryside and help people who unfortunately fall under the radar.
Right.
And if they go with that route, I'm really excited to actually see Worf because I think pairing him up with Raffi's story, especially with how Raffi, it's interesting with this, especially in this episode, because we finally get more concrete information on her motivation. That little conversation that between her and her ex-husband did so much for me to contextualize and understand Raffi's motivations now, to the point where it's like, now I understand why she's with Worf. Because if you look at Worf and his entire narrative of how, like, his warrior mentality.
Yeah.
That's how it's going to transition over to Raffi, and Raffi's mentality that she made all the decisions she made. She thought she was doing it for the greater good, but she didn't understand that basically all those decisions that she made still affected those people that she forgot.
Who are you talking about?
Her husband and her son.
Yeah.
And that's why I loved about just spending that 5 minutes with that character just erased a lot of like the bad taste of that character. And that's why introducing Worf to her, I think, is another good step for that narrative. I'm still trying to figure out how they're going to tie that story with Picard's story. And that has me intrigued.
I'm sure it's all connected.
It has to be.
Yeah, it's not going to be some random story that doesn't.
It has to be, but it's
together,
like the interesting thing is how are you going to merge it together?
Well,
you know
that's what we're all waiting to see, right? That's why we watched the show.
Yeah,
we'll see what happens. One standout aspect, Dave, that I really appreciated, and please don't hate me, people out there again. I love Patrick Stewart, but one of my complaints since the first season is that he doesn't really feel like Picard. He feels like a shell of his former self. And perhaps in season 1, you could say that maybe that was the point, that he was a man that kind of lost his way a bit, and he needed to rediscover himself and realign himself with possibly a goal rather than just allowing himself to sit on, in his house and get old. I feel like that's a lot of what Matalas was trying to say in the second season with Q.
Yeah.
Viewing Picard as a disappointment, trying to invigorate him by sending him back in time. Like, listen, I'm going to bring you back to life. I'm going to imbue you with some type of life again. You're just aging. What happened to you, Picard? You've gotten old and you've gotten comfortable. You're no longer who you were. You were the bright beacon within humanity. So maybe that was the point. And now here, for the first time, David, he actually asserts himself and he feels like Picard.
Oh, yeah.
And I love it because everyone listens. The moment he raises his voice and he finally uses his authority as an admiral and takes control of the situation, what does Shaw do?
He backs down.
Shaw backs down immediately, sits in the chair and says, okay. I like that. And it makes it almost forgives all those other aspects of Picard. And you can almost understand where Picard's coming from. Picard's never been that type of guy ever. We've seen it in Next Generation. He doesn't have an ego to where we've seen it when Jellicoe took over. We saw it when the Admiral that he tried to feed crumpets to that didn't like his crumpets at first. He always tries to be diplomatic. And that sometimes means to let your ego go. So in a lot of ways, you can look at the last 2 seasons as someone who is just kind of realizing I'm not really in command anymore. I'm retired. I don't need to assert my authority. It's not my place. I'm not going to just come in here and be Captain Kirk, because that's what Captain Kirk would do.
Oh, yeah.
So, but when it mattered, when it dealt with his son, with Dr. Crusher's son, he finally stood up and took control. I fucking loved it because that was him rediscovering himself in a lot of ways.
Finding the old Picard that we all know, because just like you said, it'd be one thing if they went with that story that you mentioned about how he's a shell of himself. He doesn't believe in himself anymore. He's lost his identity. It's the fact that everybody since season 1 has looked down and kind of dehumanized Picard. Demoralized Picard.
In the first season, for sure.
Especially the way that it'd be one thing if it was like other admirals in Starfleet, but it was every single character. Every single character would treat Picard like he's a senile old man.
Yeah.
And I'm like going, that's not the Picard that we know. We know that he is the captain of the Enterprise. He can take control. He's just not doing it.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that 2 episodes, dude, we get the Picard that we want.
Yep.
We get the Picard that basically he has his motivation now. His motivation is to save his son.
Yeah. And that moment was so powerful when I love it. I love writers and directors that know that sometimes you don't need words. As soon as Dr. Crusher walked on the bridge of the Titan,
that was good.
Made eye contact with Picard, and he closes his eyes, becomes emotional. That was one of the greatest scenes so far in all of Picard.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just need, David, subtlety. Subtlety is good sometimes. And it was so powerful, and it said everything. You didn't need words.
This was actually the one moment I think Patrick Stewart, his acting credentials come front and center.
I agree.
Front and center.
Yep.
Because there's no dialogue that needs to be said. You just have shot of Beverly, shot of Picard.
Yep.
Shot of Beverly, shot of Picard.
Just reactions, you know?
Just reactions, playing off of each other's looks. And there's no melodramatic moment. There's no, over the top melodrama. It's just you feel Picard's emotions at that point when he's confronted with the fact that that's his son, whether he wants to admit it or not. Then he comes to the realization, no, that's my son.
Yeah.
And I have to do something.
He should have known it was his son. Picard doesn't miss. He never misses his target.
Oh. I don't know what to say about that one.
Listen, he's the cutest. He knows how to assimilate.
He knows that probe. He knows.
Resistance is futile, Dr. Crusher.
You cannot refuse this English seaman.
Oh.
Or no, French.
He calls his seaman Earl Grey. Like
Earl Grey.
Yeah. That's so gross. I'm going to cut that from the show. Okay, so we have to close out the show, so we only have a few more minutes. We have to talk about Captain Vadic.
Dude.
Okay, let's skip past all the cool stuff. I mean, the ship design, the inside of the bridge, the production design is everything and more this season. I fucking love it. But the most important part, she knew Picard had a synthetic body. That has to play a part then. If she knows, that isn't everyday information. Not everyone knows Picard died and got put into a synthetic body. That's probably privileged information when you really think about it. So, that being said, for her to know, and that's the first thing she brings up, not only should it play a role, but it has to play a role. And the reason why I say it should, Dave, is because, we've mocked and made fun of that whole thing that Shea-Ban did in the first season because it just felt very strange and odd. But what did we say? It's not that he was put into a golem body. It was the fact that they completely threw out the potential of that.
Yes.
To delve into the finer details of philosophy, Cartesian philosophy, if you will, mind, body, soul, what creates the human really. That was the problem we had. It was just this weird idea to keep him alive because you wanted to make him die the whole season. You wanted to trick the audience into thinking that he was going to die of this disease. Mm-hmm. And then you wanted to kill him so it'd be dramatic when we all knew he was going to be put into that synthetic body the moment it was introduced. Because we said it, like, oh, we didn't know he was going to die, but we had assumed that, you know what? This disease he has, they're just going to upload him into this golem.
Into the golem body.
We could see it from a mile away. It was very hacky and very just weak. But if they, as Matalis has been doing for the last couple seasons, he's been trying to he's picking his battles here and taking various aspects from the first season and finding moments where he can clarify, flesh out, recontextualize, thereby fixing some of those weaker aspects from the first season. And the synthetic body is one of those weaker aspects that he can definitely use and flesh it out. And I hope it has a big part to play in this season.
I hope so too. And this starts making me think, if they tie the synthetic body to the reason why Lore shows up.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Because when you think about it, the two main villains besides Vadic that everyone knows that's going to show up is Moriarty and Lore. Lore and Moriarty are both quote unquote
artificial
intelligence. the fact that Picard, who has been a nemesis of theirs, gets turned into a synthetic body.
Yeah, exactly. So if they are still holograms, or let's say, okay, think about this. This is sheer, we're putting on tinfoil hats right now, Dave, and you're going to love it because you love these types of things.
Yeah, I do too.
Moriarty wants the technology for a golem body.
Oh, I that's where I initially thought about, because
if he's still a hologram, he wants to experience real sensation via flesh of some type.
He wants that body.
Yes. Lore also, he was dismantled. I think his body was destroyed, wasn't it? Or was it put away by Data? I think it was put away
by Data.
Okay.
Data shut him down.
Right. So perhaps somehow Lore's consciousness from his, what's the name of his brain?
Is it a matrix?
No, it's what's it called?
I think it is neuromatrix.
Positronic.
Positronic.
The positronic mind that he has, the positronic brain is what they call it. Let's say they upload that into Inagio Soong's body. Essentially erasing that. That would justify his age.
That would justify his age.
Yeah.
So
I don't think that's going to happen. Although the Moriarty thing, I think, could happen. If he is aligned somehow with Captain Vadic, this could be that, okay? But David, we also have one last thing here. We got to go fast, okay? We have only a couple minutes. So I'm going to leave the listeners with that aspect there. Okay, next, we didn't talk about this during our last discussion because we ran out of time. But we also have the whole scenario with the Red Lady that they keep mentioning.
Yes.
Now, we didn't get into it, but that statue was of... what's her name? The character that was, I believe she was the captain of Enterprise C. Garrett. Captain Garrett. Rachel Garrett.
Yes.
If you remember, she was the character that saw Tasha Yar's character be brought back to life, where she then crosses back. Hold on. Let me get my story straight. Hold on.
Yeah. Remember, we don't want to get them angry.
Yes. Let me remember my story. Hold on. Okay, let me just pull up the wiki. It's easier. She was the captain of the USS Enterprise C. She was fighting the Romulans, if you remember.
Oop.
Hold on, I'm losing my audio here. Hold on. Okay, so, all right. The Enterprise C, under Garrett's command, responded to a distress call from the Klingon outpost at Narendra 3, which was under attack by 4 Romulan warbirds. Now, this episode is one of my favorite episodes. It's essentially what happens is time travel gets involved. There's a temporal rift, and you essentially get this universe from the Prime universe becomes essentially a mirror universe almost. It's Starfleet has now been militarized. It's a very different future because of Garrett's Enterprise C crossing through the temporal rift. It messed up the timeline. Suddenly, Tasha Yar is back on the bridge of the Enterprise. She's alive. By the end of the episode, they send the Enterprise back in order to fix time because Guinan was the only one that could recognize that something was off. That the time didn't make sense. This timeline wasn't right. And she told Picard what needed to happen. That Captain Garrett needed to be sent back with the Enterprise C in order to fix the timeline. Tasha Yar, knowing that she was going to die and that she had no future, decided to go back. When she went back, she then had a child that became half human, half Romulan, who then became a bit of a villain during TNG.
Yes.
So we have that whole aspect. Will that come back? Or was the Dr. Garrett or Captain Garrett statue being blown up with that recruitment center? Was it just for the sake of continuity reasons, seeing a familiar name, a familiar face to get fans talking, or do you think it has something to do with that event?
I think it has to do something with that event because especially with we are dealing with
Metalis, and that dude loves his time travel.
He loves his time travel, and guess what? Vadic, for some strange reason, was really knowledgeable about not just Picard, but everybody.
Yeah.
She even knew about she knew about Shaw.
And she had unknown technology.
And she had an unknown technology on her ship.
Yeah.
I don't know if the unknown technology was the freaking, tractor beam technology that she had.
That's what they implied, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like, she obviously had ties to technology that was not familiar to the TNG crew, which would explain possibly a tie to time travel, because her ship does not look like the normal ship that you'd expect, especially around this time.
Yep.
Her ship is completely different.
Yeah.
Does not look anything like anything we've seen before.
Yeah, so they're going to have to bring it back. So we'll see. All right, Dave, we do need to close out our show. We don't have time for final thoughts. Just give me your RMD score.
My RMD score for this one is higher than the last one. Last week, I believe I gave it an 89. I'm giving this one a 93. I'm beginning to feel more relaxed with this story, and I'm really seeing one of the biggest things, Mike, that I took away from this. This is 2 episodes. This is what we get when we have an experienced television writer
and a guy who knows Star Trek,
and a guy who knows Star Trek, and a guy who knows how to show run, versus season 1, Michael Chabon, who did not have any experience at all.
He had zero television.
He had zero
or
television
movie experience.
He was a good writer, supposedly.
I still don't understand how he got the job.
Because of his reputation as a novelist. That was it.
Yeah, okay. You know what, David? Just because there are great tales. Hold on, let me think of something very condescending. Let me think of something very condescending to say. Just because there are stories, great grand stories told of my Uncle Chewy, who is a fantastic grease monkey and he can repair the fuck out of your car, doesn't make him qualified to build a car from the ground up. Nor, let me bring this closer to home. It doesn't make him qualified to write a TV show. Just because you're good at one thing, it doesn't mean you're good at the other.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Let's end this. Oh wait.
You have to give your score.
91%. It was a good episode. I really enjoyed it. I have no problem with an episode that felt a little slower. It was built on. It was more. You know what? No final thoughts. I said I gotta stick to my rules. Okay. Bye.
Okay. Bye. Live long and prosper.